Welcome to the On Adventure podcast with Josh Self. I'm Josh Self, and I'll be your host today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. All of these adventure stories are always interesting because I get to really feel what it's like for my guests in their own pursuits of extraordinary adventure. It's not just the story that I'm after, though. I want to know what they learn about themselves when they push to the edge of what they thought was possible. And then, when they're staring the scariest part of the journey right in the face, what do they find when they continue past? So without further ado, enjoy the conversation. Rob Angst, we're here on the On Adventure podcast. You just told me this is your first time doing a podcast, which is cool.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tidal wave kind of thing.
Okay, cool.
Because I'm super introverted and very kind of quiet. So normally the things that like most other people would get nervous about, like the things that I do for fun, they don't really make me nervous. But like public speaking and stuff like that, no, it's like,
well, there'll be people listening
some
to
diapers,
this.
you know.
Yeah, you don't have to see them.
Right.
Listening to you, but I really appreciate you coming in and doing this. And,
thanks. My pleasure.
The little bit that I know of what you've gotten yourself into over the years, I'm really excited to see where the conversation goes.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about where you're from, what you do now, and then we'll get into some of your outdoor adventures.
Sure.
After that.
So I'm 30, just turned 30. Right now I'm running 2 businesses. I'm a personal trainer. I have my own business. I run that out of my shop. I actually have like my own home gym set up.
Oh, cool.
And I also run a dog boarding business right now. And that I started
at
that.
Your house?
Yeah, at my house. And I started that last May, and it has really blown up.
Yeah,
I wasn't expecting it to do the things that it has done. But yeah, my personal training business has actually taken a bit of a side seat to the dog boarding business.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So how do you, when you're planning, and we'll get into your outdoor trips here in a second, but running a business myself, can be difficult at times to get away from that business. What you
feel
do
married to it.
Is it easy to kind of put a line in the sand and say, I'm going to be gone 4 weeks or whatever you end up doing?
I think for me, it might be easier because I grew up with that mental switch before the businesses came about, especially for like regular jobs and stuff. Like when I did the AT, I worked for a grocery store, and it was a very toxic environment there and stuff. And I didn't even tell them I was leaving. I just popped out. And the PCT, same thing. I was just able to make that mental switch of like, all right, this is what we do now. This is how we conduct ourselves, and this is our full-time job. And we just make that switch. And then coming home, the mental switch is a lot harder when you come home from stuff like that. But once you do it enough times, you're like, all right, that's done. Now we do this.
Kind of like culture shock, getting back into the real world.
Oh, yeah.
Totally.
I learned a lot about culture shock and how to mentally get over the hump of that from Knowles. Do you know Knowles? Yeah. I did Knowles when I was 21.
Okay.
I did the mountaineering course in Washington, and it was a full month of mountaineering. You're out there the entire month. You don't really go back to civilization except like once a week or so. You go to like some road in the middle of a national park to drop off all your food, or your bags and your trash and stuff, and then somebody in a pickup or whatever from Knowles gives you your next week or two of food, and then you're gone. And so when you're out there for a month and you're only really interacting closely with like 9 other people the whole time, and you get really close with those people, you really learn how to rely on each other once you get back. And it got to a point where like our last day we'd gone to a grocery store in Spokane, Washington, I think it was, and the smells of the food were so strong because we had been up in like alpine territory. There was not really anything to sniff. You just get hit with this wall. Like you go to the
sensory
produce
overload.
section. Oh my God. And the people walking around and the noise and everything. It got to a point that me and 2 other guys, we were there, and we just like held on each other's shoulders and like walked up and down the aisles and kind of like stared at the floor.
Yeah.
And kept talking to each other as if there was nobody else around. And that was like, my first taste into like, this is what it's like to live your life in an extreme way. And then come back to what is perceived as normal.
Yeah.
And for that to feel extreme. So
That is very interesting. So
Yeah.
did Knowles help train that transition, or was it just through the experience of that you learned, okay, this is what I've got to do to adapt?
Both really.
Okay.
Our instructors, shout out to Mike and Mitch if you guys happen
Mike
to
and
hear
Mitch.
this. Mike and Mitch, yeah, Handlebar Mitch. He had this crazy handlebar mustache. He's one of the best teachers I've ever had in a couple of ways, but one of the big ways is he would read these poems to us during Knowles about coming back from stuff like this.
Okay.
And it was especially in the final weeks, he kind of like leaned on that a bit more. And, the couple of weeks that, we learned mountaineering skills, crevasse rescue, pulley systems, land navigation, like leadership. You would do like a leadership day where you would take charge of the entire group and move your group from one part of the mountains to the other using navigation and delegation and, leadership skills. But yeah, towards the end there, he was like, all right, here's how you transition back and take the skills that we've taught you in this isolated environment and use them moving forward. And Knowles was the thing that really sparked me to do it didn't spark me to do the AT, it gave me the confidence to do so.
That makes sense.
Because there was a guy there, particularly him, his trail name was Flyby. And he was like 6'2", and he's got this like ridiculous wingspan, and he just looks like this giant limmy guy, super fast. And he had done the PCT and the CDT.
Okay.
And I had told him about my trepidation of doing the AT, and could I do this next year? Like, could I do this next March? Is this a thing? And he was the one who really instilled the confidence in me of like, oh yeah, dude, you've got this. You've got the mindset for it, and all that good stuff.
Well, that's interesting you mentioned that. So tell me a little bit more about what you've learned about the importance of mindset as you prepare to do these kind of hard adventures.
So this is where the translation is difficult for me, because the things that are perceived as difficult by most other people, it wasn't for me, because I grew up so much doing it already. And I guess what you could describe it as is like physical discomfort within an outdoor environment. That's like the main thing that most people are concerned about when they go on these long distance trails. Is I'm concerned about the discomfort that is brought on by being outdoors. I didn't really have that hard of a transition because it was something that I was looking forward to the most. It wasn't really something that I had trepidation about. My biggest trepidation, I would say, about doing the AT was planning. That was the big thing. I didn't know how to plan for shit.
Yeah.
Like I just winged it.
Did you
most
really?
of the time? Oh yeah.
All right.
Most of the time.
Let's set that to the side, because I want to spend a lot of time on your time on the trails. But if we back up a little bit before Knowles, tell me where you grew up and what growing up was like for you, and how the outdoors fit into that.
Sure. So I grew up with just my two folks, and my dad's from Long Island. All of his family lives up in Long Island. My mom is from here. In case you've noticed, my dad's got the heavy New York accent, and my mom's got the kind of the country twang. And they mixed. And
a little bit of both.
They came up with this accentless person that sits before you. Unless I get really angry, then I turn into like this total redneck like accent. It's hilarious. But my mom was always very nurturing of creative ideas that come out of your own self. And it wasn't anything that was like explicitly spelled out. It was just something that she did by example. Like she would write her own poems and she would do her own projects and things like that. And seeing that as a kid kind of gave me of like, oh, you can do whatever you want. Like this is your own planet. Like you're good.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to pick what everybody else is doing. And my dad's the backpacker in the family. He had his, I guess you could say his relationship with God was the same as his relationship with trees.
What do you mean by that?
Like he would go to church, and we would go to church. We did the Pentecostal Free Will Baptist thing for a while with like the foot washing and all that. And I would be sitting in the pews, and I would be just confused as to like, what the hell is going on? My dad, I would look to him, and my mom was kind of into it. She grew up more in that space, but my dad would just be sitting there kind of like staring off. And I was just like, why are we here?
Yeah.
And then, we started going off into the woods, and the presence that my dad would have going from that space to out in the woods, he would like turn into a kid. He'd just be like, look at this. This is awesome. And so that kind of deep comfort in the wilderness was something that really like kind of like bled out from my dad onto me.
I think that what you're describing is something that I've noticed, and I've heard other people say this too. This is not, I didn't come up with this, but the wonder and awe that we all have to have that. Like to be a full, wholehearted human being, we've got to have something that triggers that in our brains.
Yeah.
I think nature does that naturally for most people. Many people don't get to that point though. So, and that's what I feel like you're describing with your dad is his heart came alive.
It was a lot more.
And for some people that is sitting in the pews and communing with God in church.
Yeah.
That they can find that sense of awe and wonder.
Yeah.
It's just different.
And that was the thing too, is like to kind of loop it back into the whole like discomfort thing. Mm-hmm. I think I was lucky because my mental state was so overflowed with curiosity.
Interesting.
And interest and intrigue and then passion that by the time I got old enough to know that things were supposed to suck, I didn't. And so I would be out with friends, or I'd be like, hiking with them, and they'd be like, it's hot. And I was like, didn't even occur to me. I'm too busy looking at trees.
Yeah.
Or I'm too busy like watching this squirrel run upside down, which just still blows my mind to this day that it can do that. So it was never never an issue until things got like really, really, really uncomfortable. Then I started to actually notice.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a sense of mindfulness and presence in the moment that you're in. I wonder were you born with that ability, or is that from seeing your dad and kind of nurturing through, I mean, both your mom and your dad, from what you're describing, it gave you a sense of presence and that kind of focus.
And so my parents, we were kind of poor growing up. And one of the major things that my parents did when they were together was go to the movies. That was their thing. They love movies. They're abject cinephiles. It's hilarious. And so, so I grew up with all of these role models and stuff through media. So this funny thing is kind of anecdote. I was younger and I didn't really understand the concept of property. And what I mean by like property, I mean like land. And so when I was a kid growing up in this little starter neighborhood in Willow Springs, I would just go off in one direction, just pick a direction and just go for as far as I could. And I would cross people's backyards, and I would cross like, county lines and like all kinds of stuff. And I come home one day and, after getting in trouble again for trespassing without even knowing it. And I had spent a lot of time growing up on Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings was huge in my family. It still is. Like, it's like a Christmas tradition. We'll watch the entire trilogy.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And, Frodo and Sam making that, I think it's 800 to 1,000-mile journey to Mordor, all of that. I just grew up, really, like, soaking all of that in. I came home one day, and I don't remember what age I was. I think I was, like, 9 or 10, something like that. And my dad had an Appalachian Trail refrigerator magnet stuck on the fridge one day. I was like looking at this thing, and I recognized our state because North Carolina is very unique looking from a map. And I was looking at the line snaking through all the other neighboring states and stuff. And I was like, Dad, what is this? And he was like, oh, it's the Appalachian Trail. I was like, well, what is it? And he was like, well, it's this trail that goes from, Georgia to Maine. And according to him, I looked at him and I said, legally? Like,
because you had spent so much time trespassing on it.
Oh, yeah, I kept getting in trouble for stuff, know, and so my dad was like, yeah, you won't get in trouble. You can go as far as you want. I was like, wow, okay, I'm going to do that. Yeah. And so, yeah, it kind of just like stuck in the back of my skull through growing up and through all of those things. And that was like the beautiful thing about the AT. It was always like this weird little like goalpost in the back of my head as I grew up and I made friends and like puberty happened and high school happened and all these like other influences, came at me. It was almost as if, the AT was in the back of the picture waving. you know, like,
just waiting on you.
Still here. I'm ready when you are, you know. So, yeah.
So as you grew up, did you do several backpacking trips with your dad?
So we didn't really get into the backpacking thing until I was like 16, somewhere in there. Yeah. And my first backpacking trip was hilarious. So we went to Mount Mitchell, and I had grown up watching Lord of the Rings, Jeremiah Johnson, all this like mountain man kind of stuff, and knew nothing really about it. And my dad is one of those people who will tell you what you need to do. He's also a big introvert like me, and he's got a limited tank, you know, and he'll tell you what it is that you need to do, and then beyond that, it's like you're on your own.
You gotta figure it out.
Like, you got to figure it out. So we went and we did Mount Mitchell. We did the Black Mountain Crest Trail, I think it was, and I wore jeans and a t-shirt, and I think I had regular tennis shoes on, and I brought my little Grand Trunk hammock, and I brought no food and one water bottle, and it was for 2 days. Didn't plan a thing. And so we get out there, and I've got a fleece jacket as well, and it starts raining, you know, it's 40 degrees. It's like March, you know, and I'm like looking up, and I was like, oh man, what is this? He's like, it's rain, man. And when I had spent so much time outside, you get rained on, it's fine. You just go back inside after playing outside in the rain. You take a shower and you're good. I didn't know that when we were out there. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, this is new. And so I got really introduced to, like, you know, here's how you prepare to do a backpacking trip. And, you know, my dad didn't completely leave me out in the cold. Kind of. He packed like one extra meal for me because he knew that I was going to fuck up. So
Interesting.
yeah. And so, you know, we hiked through the rain, and I was soaking wet and in jeans and everything. I was still having a blast. And that night, didn't have any dinner, so he gave me some of his, and I strung up my hammock in the rain, so I had no idea what to do. I was like, I guess I'll just lay here like a soaked taco and just freeze my ass off because I'm stupid. And my dad strung his hammock above mine, and then he had his rain tarp, you know, situated above everything. But even then, it was almost like a poignant lesson because he was hanging over me. And the way the rain went down his hammock line is it would drip off and it would land on my head. And I just sat there in my hammock all night, didn't sleep a wink, and just got dunk, 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 hitting the forehead over and over and over again the entire night. And I remember thinking to myself, like, okay, there's some things to learn about.
Yeah, I mean, some people go, this is miserable. I never want to do this again. That clearly was not your response to it.
No, I just really fell in love with it. It was, I guess my perspective was different. This was not that hard. This was easy compared to talking to people. This was easy compared to math. This was easy compared to going to school, or, you know, dealing with all of my friends who want, you know, girlfriends and all this other craziness, and like all of these other pressures that society was trying to put on me.
Yeah. Drop them and just go hike.
Yeah, you can drop them and go hike. And I felt lucky because it was perceived as something difficult, you know, and it was like, oh, this is not that bad.
Yeah.
At least in the beginning. Then it did get kind of hard.
Yeah. So, I mean, from that experience to Knowles,
yeah.
what else did you do to kind of work your way into things more extreme?
Spent a lot of time just walking around outside, and me and my buddies, we would play this game that we would just pick a direction, and we would go in that direction. I'd have my little compass, and whatever natural obstacle was there, we would go through it. And if it was, 30 yards of briars and then a muddy creek and then a highway, we would do it. And it was just an adventure because all of my other buddies were huge Lord of the Rings fans too. Okay. So we thought like the arduous journey was like the reason for doing this in the first place, And so that kind of like led into me really wanting to actually backpack. And then I fell in love with mountaineering. And so I was in college and not doing very well in college. And once again, I feel like these people just come from out of nowhere to like give you a spark,
Yeah, totally.
And Mark Schleier, if you're out there. I know you're probably not going to hear this. You're probably still in a tent in New Zealand somewhere. But I met Mark Schleier my first year of college, and he was this big rock climber, outdoorsy kind of guy. And he was the one who had a Knowles catalog on his bed in his dorm room. And I, like, picked it up and, like, flipped through it. And, you know, I'm from North Carolina. I'd never seen snow-capped mountains before and, like, the huge, like, peaks and whatnot. And I was just like, oh, man, like, that shit's real.
Yeah.
And so, once again, what would normally shy other people away was like, oh, that's my ticket. Because it was like, oh, for the low price of $5,000, like, you could go to this thing for a month. Mm-hmm. And most other people I would talk to would be like, that's a lot of money for a month. And in my head, I was like, so if I bag groceries for like this long.
You figured it out.
Yeah. If I bag groceries and push shopping carts for this long, I can save up and I can go do this utterly life-changing experience. Mm-hmm. Let's do it. So I went home, started some community college stuff, and, you know, just worked and worked and worked and worked. And yeah, and then I went to Knowles, and it was one of those things where the excitement and the curiosity once again just like shoved me into it and really gave me the confidence, because it wasn't like I was consciously deciding to be confident. Mm-hmm. It was like I was just ignoring everything else and just wanting to do it.
Kind of in the zone.
Yeah, it was like when I got asked, like, you know, are you nervous? It was like, I'm not even thinking about that. I was thinking about, like, look at these cool plastic mountaineering boots. Like, they would give you these, like, hard plastic, you know, super dense boots, and you felt like you could kick over a tree with them, man. Like, they were so cool. And that was it. It was just the excitement and enthusiasm, you know, managed to kind of foster all of this, I would say.
How long did it take you to save up the money to be able to do that?
A year. Yeah. It was a year of, and I was living with my parents, so I didn't really have, like, all that much in the way of expenses. And, you know, my parents were, like, feeding me and stuff. And so they were telling me, like, okay, like, you save up the money to do this and you go do it. And that was kind of the deal. You know, it's like you work, you save up to go do this Knowles thing, you go do this Knowles thing. And so I came home, and I don't know what they were really expecting after that, because it was July when I went. I came home in August. And I think it was a little bit after my birthday. My birthday is September 12th. And I think it was like mid-September. I can still see it in my mind's eye. You know, we're all sitting around having dinner. And I was just like, okay, here we go. This is what I'm actually nervous about. Mom, Dad, I want to go hike the Appalachian Trail next year. And it was a mixed reception.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. My parents were like, oh, wow. And then just kind of like a neutral face.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was either hoping for like extreme enthusiasm or like, you know, completely against it. And this kind of like middle thing
left me
confused. Yeah. I was like, oh, okay. I'm going to let it sit here.
So were you asking for permission, or you were... Yeah,
no.
You're saying this is what I want to do.
This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And my dad will roll his eyes and like confirm this with you too. Is like, I have and this is kind of an issue with relationships too. I have this issue where I just tell people I'm going to do something, and the permission thing is really difficult for me to for it to occur to me.
Yeah.
The relationship I'm in right now, my fiance, she's been the best one to be like, what do you, no.
Yeah, kind of pointing it out.
Kind of, maybe you should ask a little bit if you're going to go do this thing. Maybe run it by some people instead of like, all right, deuces, I'm going to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a hard transition, especially for an extreme introvert where everything's internal and internally processed.
Yeah, and I was so used to just doing things on my own.
Yeah.
And like even my high school buddies, like they sort of lost interest in doing all the crazy adventure-y, you know, let's go like swim down this creek and let's see how far it goes kind of a thing. They all kind of like, you know, one of them became a musician and another guy became this, another guy became that, and they kind of just like split and like went their own ways. But me, it always just kind of still stuck around. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it occurs to me you found out very early something again, I didn't come up with this. I'm copying it from somebody else, but first principles, like things that are 2 or 3 things that are the non-negotiables in your life. It sounds like to me that you're living through those, that is the framework and how you've decided to set up your life. Even the 2 businesses that you mentioned earlier, I would imagine those are in support of the things that you really want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So the personal training thing was always like a love. I discovered training when I was 17. I just kind of like fell into it and really fell in love with particularly like gymnastics and body weight training and stuff like that. And it was, once again, it was like the outdoor pursuits. It was one of those things that I could like kind of take and go off somewhere and just have it myself. And that was the thing, is like I never really told very many people about the things that I was doing. And
was that on purpose, or you just
didn't occur to me?
Sure.
Like it was just like, it was the thing that I do. You don't really, well, not in today's day and age. Today's day and age, you tell everybody everything that you're doing, which is still kind of confusing to me.
Super. Yeah.
But yeah, even when I started, training, I would sneak off into the bonus room of my parents' house and try handstands at like 2 a.m. when I couldn't sleep and stuff. And I trained for a year and was doing, building up to like handstand push-ups and heavy weighted pull-ups and all this like crazy maneuvers, but I didn't tell anybody. And it was actually my mom who, figured it out. And I wasn't doing it in secret. Like I was just like, all right, I'll be back. And I'd be gone for an hour and then I'd come back. And we were at a Walmart. I still remember this. We were at a Walmart and I was pushing the shopping cart and my mom was behind me and she goes, I was like, 17, and she was like, what is going on with your back? And I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, you got this V thing going on. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. And eventually I like kind of told her, I was like, hey, I've been doing like this, loading heavy plates into a backpack and doing pull-ups with it. And she's like, where did you get the idea to do this? And I was like, I found it on a website. I thought it was cool. So I've just been doing it. And it was the same thing with the hiking. Like I didn't really have like a huge amount of, I guess you could call it like public preparation. Like I wasn't going around like telling all of my relatives and stuff. My mom is the one who does that shit. She'll post it everywhere and like, my son's doing this. And it's amazing to see. And I do not want to rein her in at all on that stuff because it's what she loves to do. Yeah, but for me, it was never a thing for external purposes. It was just an activity that I greatly pursue. It's like the Zen thing that you talk about. I love just being there, and it's just the process and the act of doing it that's super pleasurable to me.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So that kind of physical training would be, to me, seems natural that it would be useful when you get into the longer distance hiking to have the kind of core strength, body stability. You probably lost quite a bit of muscle though doing the long distance trips.
Yeah, I lost everything. It was
had to start from scratch.
Yeah, basically. And that was, so the AT, I was still pretty small. I was like 150 pounds. I was like kind of like dense and wiry. But yeah, I lost 21 pounds. I was $129 when I finished. And I was, I could like pull my stomach in and touch my spine. Like it was like, boop, it was right there.
I don't think you're supposed to be able to do that.
No, it's freaky. It's a freaky thing. But I will say that a lot of the heavy training that I did, and what I mean heavy, I mean like heavy weights, high intensity. I don't mean like heavy, lots of, yeah. I feel like it really helped out my stability, especially towards the end where a lot of people were tripping, falling, injuring themselves. I feel like a lot of the body weight stuff that I did gave me a lot of bodily awareness. And so if I were to fuck up and slip or something, I would immediately just catch myself and be able to keep going. And so I think it definitely led to me being a lot more injury free while doing those trails, especially towards the end. Towards the beginning, it was completely useless. Like there's no point in having this much upper body musculature when you're hiking. Around. Yeah. So it's completely useless. The only thing that it really helped with, I think, was appetite. Like everybody else, from a strength training context, and this is kind of like a law of training, is anybody who's been training for about 3 to 5 years can out-eat most obese people. Like, they can eat a shitload of food.
Just the caloric burn that happens at a base level.
The basal metabolic rate that you get, it's kind of insane. And so when I got onto the AT, everybody was talking about hiker hunger. And it's like, you're going to develop hiker hunger. It's coming. And I was smashing food, like, in northern Georgia, just a ton of it. And people were like, oh, so you have hiker hunger? And it's like, no, I have lifter's hunger.
Yeah.
I've always had it, and I'll always have it. It's a forever curse. And so, it taught me a couple of things, just to be able to maintain the intensity throughout the hike. And I think just a lot of the structural integrity that comes from the training, it definitely helped keep me from completely wasting away at the very end, for sure.
Gotcha. Yeah. So how old were you when you planned the AT hike?
So I planned it when I was 21, and then I turned 22, and I hiked it when I was 22. I planned it over the course of maybe like a month, somewhere in there. I owned a majority of the gear. I owned the backpack, I owned the sleeping bag and the tent and all of those things years prior. Me and my dad went to REI years ago, and for my birthday, like, we got me an Osprey backpack and like the big Agnes tent and all of that stuff. And so it just kind of like hung out in my closet whenever you're ready. Yeah. And so the final month of the AT was like, or the final month of prior planning to the AT was like, okay, what kind of food should we get? And I didn't know anything about food. I didn't carry a stove or any of that stuff. I literally just kind of ate cheese and protein bars and sausages and Pop-Tarts and Snickers.
Did that change during your time on the trail? Did you change your approach, or that was the whole time?
Yeah, and I learned that from Knowles too, is like you carry an entire cook set. You carry an iron skillet with you, which now looking back seems completely insane.
You carried that on the AT?
No, on Knowles.
On
yeah.
Knowles.
Yeah, so we carried this entire cook set for Knowles with our mountaineering gear as well. It was pure expedition style mountaineering. Yeah, you feel like Samwise Gamgee, and you're carrying all the pots and pans outside the backpack. You look like a Christmas tree, man.
Yeah.
And we did a lot of cooking. I learned to make pizza out there. Like, it was pretty cool. And then when I got on the AT, I was like, I don't want to do any of that shit. I just want to hike and sleep and hang out in the woods. I don't want to have to be bothered with cooking. And I still am quite a simpleton. I like things very simple, and it's just these couple things that I get to worry about. Yeah. And so when it came to food, simpler was better for me. So I would just pack all the non-needing cooked stuff and just pound it and just go. I'm not much of a foodie. Like, taste doesn't really...
Just need it for the nutrition.
Yeah. Just give me a block of cheese, pepper jack, I'm good to go.
One of my earlier podcast guests was big on trails and outdoors, and made the comment that it's interesting when you get, especially in the longer distance stuff, you really start trimming down as you go. Like, what do I really need to be out here?
Yeah.
And it's interesting. You don't need much.
No, you really don't.
That's probably part of the culture shock coming back of just the excess that surrounds us every single day. Yeah. It becomes like normal. But that all gets stripped away when you're spending a long time in the woods.
I think the subconscious mental load that you accrue through daily life, just with the like near infinite amount of choice, it's a lot more burdenous than I think we know. And so, when I did the PCT, especially the AT I didn't have all that much money to buy new gear. So all the kind of like heavy-ish weight stuff that I still had on me, I just had to deal with it. Yeah. Yeah. Kind of fun fact. I did the AT off of $1,800.
Did you really?
Yeah.
That always interests me is it's not just the time plan, but the financial side of planning some of these things.
Yeah.
It could get expensive.
It could get very expensive, especially if you're staying in a lot of hotels and making a lot of unplanned stops, and God help you if you get injured, and the medical bills and things like that. But yeah, the AT was $1,800 for me.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was starving at the end, and I ran out of money twice. Once was in New Hampshire, and my parents footed the bill. They gave me $100.
Okay.
They're like, "Here's $100, go." and to their credit, it wasn't because they were trying to like, kick the bird out of the nest. It was my fault again. It was like I just didn't tell them. I was having these problems of like food, and that was the other thing too. Is like the outdoor space was already not difficult. So a lot of the people doing the traditional through hikes, with $5,000 in savings, with getting food in each town, with cooking on trail, I didn't want any part of that. And I think subconsciously kind of dug myself into a hole towards the end because I wanted things to be really, really hard. And it got to a point where things did, and I was,
such as like you had no food for several days.
Yeah,
you were still hiking.
Yeah, so I was like dumpster diving, lifting food. We had, there was one guy that I was hiking with, and we were hiking along this little forested. It was like a field on one side and a forest on the other, and we hadn't eaten in like maybe 24 hours, something like that. When you're hiking, that's a big deal.
That's a long time, yeah.
And at that point, yeah, we were all hollow-eyed and kind of,
zombies.
Freaky. Yeah, and he stopped and he like looked across the field. I was like, "What is it, man?" He like dropped his backpack and he stuck one of his trekking poles in the ground. And he lengthened the other one as far as it would go, and he said, "Guard my shit." And I was like, "Okay." He took off running into the field. I'm just standing there. I'm just kind of watching him. I'm just like, okay, I see nothing. Okay. He's still running, and he's just getting further and further away.
I think he's hallucinating or something.
Yeah, and then I see a groundhog pop up over this little hill, and I see both of them disappear behind the hill as he's like spearing it. And I'm like, oh, shit.
This is like Lord of the Flies kind of stuff.
So he comes back, and he's holding this just big old groundhog. And the first thing he says is, "I don't know what to do from here."
Not a well thought out plan.
No, he definitely was. I think he was like 17. He was like this really, he had a more shoestring budget than I did. And he was one of these people who was like, "I'm just going to spontaneously go do it." He was a great guy. And so we were lucky because before the AT, I had taken on this slight hobby of hide tanning.
Okay.
And so I wasn't into hunting and killing animals. I was into just kind of like the art of making clothes out of animal skins. I thought it was really cool. And so I would find roadkill, like coons and stuff like that, and I would skin them and, tan them, and I would like give them to people.
Oh, wow.
Make hats and stuff. I wasn't really into the making of the clothes, but I was happy to have the pelts.
Yeah.
And so we were very fortunate because I was like,
you knew what to do.
I know what to do.
Yeah.
We'll figure this out. And so that night, we, skinned them and put them on a spit in front of a bunch of Boy Scouts at the shelter that we were at. And we rotated it and we ate this groundhog.
What did it taste like?
Awful.
Was it really?
It tasted like shoes. Yeah. It was like super, super gamey. And we cooked the shit out of this thing because, we didn't know parasites or anything like that. And so it was like we cooked that thing for like half an hour, just like rotating it. And
it probably was like eating leather.
Oh yeah, but it was food. And the Boy Scouts that were there, they were like, "Can we give you food? Like, can we do that?" It's like, "Yes, we'll take it.
We'll earn our charity badge for today."
Yeah. But yeah, towards the end, man, things started getting like really, really desperate and stuff.
Did that inform your planning for the next trails that you did?
Oh my God, yes.
So as not to repeat?
Yeah, so I had this kind of mantra in my head after the AT because I really wanted to do the PCT. That was definitely the next thing. And the mantra was like, okay, the AT was like this struggle for survival, this, huge kind of like cauldron of change that I just threw myself into to make myself more resilient.
Yeah.
And I wanted the PCT to be more of a lifestyle change. I wanted to be a little bit more of a central focal point that has a relationship with the rest of my life. Because that was the other thing too, is there's like a big lesson I can impart on anybody is make sure that you have a life outside of backpacking. Otherwise you will go insane.
Yeah.
And that was the thing, is like when I did the AT, I devoted everything to it. It was my everything. And so I was willing to starve. I was willing to fight animals. I was willing to steal food. I was willing to do whatever I had to do to get to Katahdin. It was my Lord of the Rings, Frodo and Sam experience, you know?
Yeah.
But the problem is you don't die when you finish it. So I had to go home. And when I went home, I had absolutely nothing going on. Didn't have a job, didn't have any prospects, had no interests of any kind. And
that is like an emotional crash. I don't even know what the
awful
word crash, it doesn't even seem to do it justice.
Yeah, it was a massive emptiness, just a huge feeling of emptiness.
How did you get through that?
Time. Yeah. That's really all I could tell you, is I would do the weirdest things. Like I would get up like 3 a.m. and go looking for foxes. You know, I would just like sit under the power lines near my house and just like listen to the woods, because I couldn't, the withdrawals from the AT were so massive that. And the other thing too is I had gone in that direction so far that I didn't feel like I was useful in any other sort of fashion.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I didn't feel like I could go get a job. I didn't know how. Like I felt like I
isn't
forgot.
true, but the felt experience of coming off the trail, it probably seemed like there were no other choices. That was.
Yeah, I felt like I had nothing else that I was capable of doing, which, as you said, it wasn't true, but I was young, and I took it to the extreme, and that was, an extreme experience, but, time was able to heal that.
So that's a point where, like in these conversations, if I was chasing the adrenaline story, it would be all about, the time on the trail, but the mental challenge of doing hard things. And I really love that you're pointing out that this came after the hard thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I'm sure there were moments in the hard thing that you had to get past, but how did you obviously didn't stop. You continued to do long distance trails. What did you do? How did you plan or prepare so that experience didn't happen again? Or did it happen again?
Right. So another thing to note is, I went to college, kind of flunked out of college, and then Noel's AT happened. That's kind of like the flow of things.
Got it.
So when I finished the AT, I also had massive amounts of student loan debt. So there was also that too, just waiting for me. And that was the thing, is I was like, I almost felt like I was avoiding home, and when I have spent so much time out there, nowhere felt like home. And I remember that I got back to my parents' house, and my mom asked me that. She was like, "Do you feel like you're home now?" And I was like, "No, I don't. I don't feel like I'm home anywhere now. Like I feel like I am rootless, but not in a good way. I felt like I was adrift." And so my friends were the best at this point, because they understood how I worked, and they were like, "All right, he needs another mission. That's it. He just needs another thing to think about." And so my friends were like, "All right, so what we're going to do is you're going to go get a job somewhere." Okay. And so I was dating a girl at the time who lived in Indiana. I actually met her on the AT, and we dated throughout the AT. So I was like, okay, I'm going to move up to Indiana, and I'm going to start working, and I'm going to get rid of these student loan debts, because if I'm going to do the PCT, I don't want to have debt at all. I don't want to have that thing hanging over my head, and, the student loan companies calling other people in my family, badgering them for money while I'm trying to avoid that thing.
So tell me what the number was, if you don't mind.
14.5 grand.
Yeah, that's a big hurdle.
Yeah. Yep. And so I have this very singular mindset, simpleton, right? Where if I do decide to do the thing, it's pretty much all or nothing.
Gotcha.
And so I had worked a couple of jobs. I worked at a vineyard for a little while. wasn't really paying me what I needed to, to earn in order to get rid of those loans. But I started working for this medical manufacturing company, and they had this thing of like, you can work as many hours as you possibly want forever. And I was just like, okay, here we go. And I think I made $12 an hour, something like that. And I worked about 70 to 80 hours a week, nonstop. I would get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I would work until like 6 or 7 p.m.
Doing what? What were you doing?
Making just medical parts, like stents.
Super tedious.
Oh, yeah. Very repetitive, stuff like that. We made this thing called an interject, which is like this needle that's attached to a tube. I have no idea how it works. All I knew was how to make it. And so that's what I did. I just made the thing.
For 80 hours a week.
Just nonstop. If there was overtime, I would go get it. If there was holiday pay, I would go get it. And so from, I think it was like November of that, I don't remember what year this was, but November to, I'd say July, I had paid off my student loans. Just
holy cow.
Just done it. And it was
because if I understood what you said earlier
Yeah.
about planning for the AT, it took you a year to come up with, was it $5,000? You did the AT with $1,800.
$1,800. Yeah, the AT was financially not really well planned. It was one of those things where it was like, I'm just going to go and do it because I was paying the minimum amount of student loans to escape them.
Yeah.
But even then, that was still a lot. And so,
So this is a different deal where you're
Yeah.
really dropping chunks at a time.
Yeah, it was one of those things that like, and this has been a pervading lesson throughout my 20s, really, was you can go do the adventurous things, but you have to have a life to come back to. Yeah, you gotta. You can't.
Man, that's a good
You can't
lesson.
just run
Yeah.
all the time. And that was the thing that, fast forward to my later 20s, is that was the big realization that I was starting to have, which is, spoiler alert, why I stopped hiking the CDT. But anyway, yeah, rewinding back to the PCT, I bought all the ultralight gear that I could. I was, ultralight really spoke to me because I was like, oh, it's only the stuff that you need, nothing more. And so I went a little bit too extreme on the ultralight stuff. Yeah, I had a 7-pound base weight, I think it was, 6 or 7.
I can't even imagine how you did that.
I had a tarp. It was just this, it was about as big around as this table. And I was like, I'm going to sleep under this tarp for the whole way. No. And that was where I learned about balance.
Okay.
Because, I started the PCT with this tarp. And I remember the ground sheet that I had that I was sleeping on was this polyethylene, some material. I bought it from Gossamer Gear for like $7. Piece of shit.
Yeah.
Oh God. The first night I woke up and it was, it was like thinner than trash bag material. And I had to stake it down with rocks and stuff to sleep on. And I went to go pull it up and there was a rock that I didn't see and it just ripped a chunk out of it. And I was first day. I was like, oh, okay. And that was when I learned, like, you can go so ultralight that the stuff that you buy is just like napkins.
Yeah.
They're just very expensive napkins. A couple days after that, I had a bunch of dirt on it, and I went to go, kind of flap it out, and it ripped in half completely. I was like, okay, great, cool. And so it was a great experience for me, though, because having gone from like expedition level mountaineering where you could like throw your gear down a mountain and it'll be fine, to like it can only sustain 5-mile-an-hour winds before it disintegrates, but it's 5 ounces.
Yeah.
It's just like this is bullshit. Okay.
Yeah.
So I got to the first town on the PCT, Julian, I believe it's called, also called Julian. Called my girlfriend, now fiance at the time, and it was like 40 degrees and raining, and I was sleeping outside of this bakery and just had the tarp up, and it was just like pouring rain. And I was dry, and some of my bag was dry, and all of my other gear was soaked. And I called her up, and I was like, this setup is not going to work.
Yeah.
Like, I cannot do this. And so I learned that, I need to take on a tiny bit more weight. And so my girlfriend shipped me her tent, technically my tent and our tent. It's kind of a funny love story. I'll tell you about that in a second. But she sent me the tent and a new sleeping pad, because my other sleeping pad that I also bought from Gossamer Gear was called a Thin Light foam pad, and it was like 3 millimeters. It was like half the width of a yoga mat. It was awful.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I'm a side sleeper, and I've got these shoulders, like my head was doing this the entire time, and just didn't work out. But
I'm a side sleeper too. So what do you do to not get that neck crick and not have your hip fall asleep in the middle of the night?
Inflatables are your friend.
Yeah. Okay.
That's I hiked with the Thermarest, the egg carton. I just call it the egg carton. It's the foam pad.
Oh, okay, yeah.
With all the little pokies coming out of it. That served me pretty well, but it's really big and bulky, and I didn't really like it. So I ended up getting the Neo Air X Therm, I think it's called. It's got the inflatable baffles. You can inflate that thing to, quite a bit of thickness, and it's decently light.
Yeah.
But the big thing that I did learn is like sleep. Sleep is super important out there. And so I got the inflatable pad, and I got an inflatable Sea to Summit pillow. I sleep like a baby out there now. And so, my first night coming out of Julian, I went from my Gossamer Gear Thin Light foam pad, big tarp, no pillow, to the inflatable pad, the inflatable pillow, and like a full tent. And like I felt like I was walking around the hotel. Like it was awesome.
Yeah.
And so I took that setup all the way to the end with me, and it's still my go-to setup. I will borderline get Big Agnes tattooed on my face. I love their stuff. They make the best tents by far.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
And I love hearing real life experiences with gear. I mean, I read stuff online about all these different things. Go to REI, talk to their salespeople.
Yeah.
Which they're generally super helpful, but there's nothing as like talking to somebody that has actually used it in the real conditions.
Yeah.
How did it perform?
Right.
So that's really cool. I've got a couple Big Agnes things, but I'll keep that in mind next time I go buy something.
I love their tents. Plus, I think you're a bit of a taller guy, so you may need to get like a different tent, but I've shorter stature, and I'm a more compact human. My dad's the same height as you, and he has the same, you probably have issues being a taller person with buying camping gear.
Yeah, I buy the extra long sleeping bags. I've got the REI Half Dome too that I hike with, because usually many times my son will go with me also, but inevitably I'm head touching the top and toes touching the bottom kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which by the morning time, both of them are wet, even with the rain fly, just dew off the ground. But
I have one of my hiking partners, Easy. He may listen to this. Who knows? I went through the Sierras with him.
Okay.
This badass 61-year-old man.
All right.
And we were the second group of the year to go through the Sierras.
Still a lot of snow.
It was like 30 feet of snow, dude. It was stupid. Yeah, we went through Forester Pass on April 23rd. Terrible.
Did you wear crampons or anything to get through the snow?
Ice spikes.
Ice spikes, okay.
Yeah, micro spikes. And we brought ice axes and all that other stuff. But
all right.
Yeah, I think it was like 5 degrees when we went over Forester Pass. It was so stupid, but it was. Yeah, we were the second ever group. It was like going through the Himalayas for a month. It was really something.
Wow.
Best experience for sure. Hated it, but it was also like I wouldn't trade it for the world for sure.
Do you take pictures when you like?
Lots.
Do you? Okay.
Tons of pictures.
Yeah, I think people either go one way or the other. Like, I don't want to take pictures. I want to capture it in my mind, and that's going to be the picture.
Yeah, no, that's not how that works.
Yeah.
The mind's computer is too efficient.
Yeah.
I feel like you can lock yourself onto a moment, but I'm sorry, but your brain doesn't care.
Yeah.
Like years will go by and it will fade. And the thing is, and somebody told me this years ago, and they said, when you're remembering something long ago, you're remembering the memory of that thing because you're remembering the last time that you remembered it. And I was like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
And so after that, too, I was like, I got to take all the pictures.
Yeah.
And so, I'm a big documentarian kind of person, too. I like the science and the numbers and all that stuff as well.
So did you keep like a spreadsheet of your miles and every day what you did, where you were?
Yep.
That's cool.
So I journaled.
Yep.
The last 2 pages of my journal was miles walked, and I would write every day, and animals. And so I have this big, like, David Attenborough size list of all the animals that I've seen. Even like the really annoying ones, like things that I thought were going to be a novelty and then turned out to just be like work.
Yeah.
Like lizards. Like when I was hiking through the desert section of the PCT, the lizards, like you see 2 of them, and you're like, oh, lizard, look at that. And you mark it in your journal, and you're like, next day you're like, oh, there's 12. Okay, I'll mark it. And the next day it's like, oh, there's 35. Okay.
Start getting tired of them.
Yeah, and so I think I wrote in my journal like thousands. I think I just wrote thousands for lizards. And then, for a bunch of those animals, though, like some of them, you would see them and you'd never see them again, but it would just be like, I have to write down that I saw this one. Yeah. Like bobcats, where I saw 3 bobcats on the PCT. Yeah, and it was one of those things.
They're beautiful.
Oh my God, they're so scary.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're probably hunting you or something around you.
They're at least, they're working. Yeah, they're at work. They're killing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole animal thing, though, was it was the same thing. It was the same thing as the outdoor kind of experience. It's like something that should be arduous or kind of scary. It was more of a
intrigue,
more of a feel for curiosity for me. Yeah, it was
I can see that.
And I was one of those people. I don't condone doing this, obviously, especially in grizzly country. Just don't. But I would get up early in the mornings. I love early morning hiking.
Okay.
When I did the PCT, people will roll their eyes. I'd get up at 4 o'clock in the morning every day.
Just go.
And I loved it. That pre-dawn hiking, nobody around, all of the animals are busy. And when I did the AT, the second half, I hiked without trekking poles, so I was very quiet. And I would see like pine marten and like weasels and all kinds of bear, owls. Like, yeah, it was really cool.
Tell me, and you picked the trail, but what was the scariest, most worrisome animal encounter that you came across?
So I'll do for all 3 trails because they all stick out in my mind pretty great. AT, the most magical experience for me was a pine marten. I was sitting in the whites. I was just eating a bag of Skittles, just hanging out, looking out over the Franconia Ridge and stuff. And I see this thing like running up the rock face. And my first thought was like, whose fucking cat is out here? Because it's doing like the cat thing, waddle. And then it got closer and it was like a deep, beautiful red velvet color. And I was like, is that a weasel? And then it got really close to me. And I was very lucky because a few days before, I'd run into one of those like Naturegram kind of boards that you see in parks a lot. And they had like common or rare species, and one of them was pine marten. And I always thought, I love weasels. I'm a big weasel fan. I love like wolverines and martens and stuff like that. And so like I saw him run up on me. He stopped and kind of like did this weird like head movement. And it was one of those things where I was carrying a digital camera at the time, and it was in my backpack. And I was like, there is no possible way that I'm going to be able to get this picture. So I'm going to sit here and just look at him. And he looked at me and kind of stared at me, and I didn't move. Didn't know whether or not his eyesight was good. I didn't know enough about them. But he kind of like stared at me, and he did this cool like 180 pivot on just his hind feet and just like soared off the mountain. Just boop, 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 boop.
Oh, wow.
Just ran off down this like vertical face.
Are they aggressive animals at any point? Yeah,
I don't think so. Yeah, they are predatory. They will go after like rabbits and stuff like that. But as far as like territorial, I mean, they're only like 2 feet long at most. They're
it's almost like seeing a ghost. You don't normally.
Yeah, when you see like a mink or something like that, you're just like, I'm not supposed to be seeing you.
Yeah, that's cool.
You spend a lot of your effort trying not to be seen. And so scariest on the AT was definitely that damn turkey.
Turkey did not expect you to say that.
So you'll learn this about me. I fucking hate birds.
Okay.
I hate birds. Ever since I was a kid, my mom had this parrot named Dusky. He hated me. I hated him. He would bite me and like chase me in the house and stuff.
And so that was translated into every bird of the same.
It's just I've always had really rotten luck with birds.
Okay.
Like I run a dog boarding business. I get along great with dogs. I was raised with dogs. All my friends and stuff call me dog whisperer. Like at parties, I'm always the dude who's sitting on the floor with the dogs. Birds? No. And so I was doing my highest mileage day on the AT. I think it was 40 miles in a day. And I was doing it in New York. And I was trying to catch this train that I didn't catch. And I was trying to do 40 miles. So I got up at like 3 a.m. and started trucking. And I was like 20-something miles in. I got my music in, and I'm trudging along, and I'm staring at the ground, being all aggressive and stuff. And I stop, and I look up, and there's this turkey, this female turkey, and she's, me to you, 2 feet away. And she's just staring at me, head all cocked to the side. And I'm like frozen in place. I'm like, what do I do? And all of a sudden, all these little chicklets start popping out of the leaves.
Oh my gosh.
And they start running towards her. And I look down, and one of them pops out in between my feet and runs right to Mom. And she sees me and just makes this weird chortling noise and just makes a beeline, just runs right at me, full berserk mode. And I like, "Wah!" And I turned around and just took off running the other way. And it's funny, if I still think about it, I can hear her pecking my backpack.
Oh my gosh.
As I was running. She was trying to kill me, dude.
Yeah.
And I just ran down the trail. And I think I made it maybe 50 to 100 feet before she turned around and ran off to go find her brood and collect everybody. And I took my backpack off and doubled over. I was like, what the hell just happened?
I did not know that was a possibility.
Oh yeah. And so ironically enough, so I made it to the train station, and my father's side of the family lives in Long Island. And so I was going to take the train, go to Manhattan, walk around Manhattan for a little bit, and then take the train from there to Northport in Long Island. I was going to visit my family. So I did that, hung out with them for about a week, came back, took all the trains back to the train station that I had gotten on, started my northbound journey again. And as soon as I got on trail, I come off the rail tracks, and I start crossing the field that goes into the woods. And I felt like somebody hit me in the back of the head with a baseball or a tennis ball. And I'm just like, what was that? And I look up, and there's this red-winged blackbird, and he is dive bombing me.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
assuming there was a nest or something nearby.
Okay.
And so I had to run across the field as he was near, just aerial assaulting me. And I ran into the woods, and it was
I can see why you don't like birds.
I was like, what the hell's going on? Yeah. What did I do? And so, yeah.
Anything like that on the PCT?
No. There was a bear that I kind of ran into on accident. I wouldn't say it was scary because of how quickly it started and then ended. I was going north out of Tehachapi. It's this little town in the desert. And it was super windy. You climb up on this really windswept ridge, and the winds were crazy. It was so loud you couldn't even hear anything. And so I'm hiking along, and I'm assuming he didn't hear me and I didn't hear him. And we just kind of intersected. And it was one of those things where he was he almost ran into me, physically bumped into me. And I stopped, and I looked at him, and he stopped, and, I don't know if you've had bear encounters where you surprise them, but they look oh, they just have this oh shit look.
Oh, really?
And I think he was my 9th or 10th bear that I had run into. And so the instinct of what to do had already happened. And I just went whoa, just puffed up, and he just turned around and bombed down the hill. And I don't know if you've ever seen them run down a mountain before, but it's like a dump truck. Yeah. They're not subtle. They knock over trees and stuff. It's hilarious watching their big butts just
Yeah.
And so that was kind of frightening a little bit, but it was one of those things of whew, okay, let's keep going, because you're not going to run into him again. He's not going to go looking for you or anything. And that was always the big thing coming back home was did you see any bear? I was yeah, I did, but they're I mean, they're like big raccoons. They're not really, I mean, they are dangerous.
Yeah.
Let's not kid ourselves here, but
I mean, they're generally not aggressive unless you're getting between a mom and a cub. Is that accurate?
yes. And even then, if you give them the right of way or a chance, they're not aggressive either. Because I ran into a mama bear in Oregon or Washington, and she had nowhere to go. Like, she was cornered, and it was her and her cub. And it was one of the things where, like, she was up on this hill, and I had to cross in front of her in order to keep going. And it was one of those things where, like, I don't know if this was what I was supposed to do, but I took my backpack off, I sat it next to a rock, and I just, like, sat down. And I just held my hand. I was like, go. Just go. And she was like, she kind of puffed up a little bit and maybe kind of like mock charged me. And then once she saw, I was like, oh, he doesn't care. And honestly, and that I have no scientific basis for this at all. I honestly feel like the pheromones that you put out, and I feel like apathy is a pheromone. I feel like it is, because I feel like she smelled me and was like, oh, he doesn't give a shit.
Not a threat.
He's not really here to do anything.
Yeah.
And so she walked past me. She was, 10, 12 feet in front of me with her cub. And
That's close.
And her cub, cub was like, "Oh, look at the thing." And it was funny. She was more worried about him than me. And she had to like swat him, like, "No, leave the man alone. Let's go." And so they went down towards the river, and I just like sat and watched them go by. And I was like,
That's amazing.
I'm not going to move. And if you come over to me, I'm just not going to move still. I'm not going to run. I'm just going to lay here like a puppy, And so she walked on by, and that was it, As far as the animals and the PCT go, everything was from a pretty fair distance, except the bobcats. One of them was remarkably close. It was one of those things where I was hiking in the morning and oops, ran into each other again.
Yeah. Now, how soon after the PCT did you do the Continental Divide Trail?
So the CDT is a very interesting story. There was 3 attempts, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So what happened was I finished the PCT in August. And August? Yes, August 2nd. Yeah, August 2nd. I get my dates confused sometimes. And I came home, and I was very, very focused on doing the Triple Crown. Like, that to me, in my head, was the end-all, be-all of wilderness travel experience. Like, if you could do the Triple Crown, you are
AT, PCT, CDT.
and the CDT. If you do all 3, it's called the Triple Crown. And if you do that, you are a certified wilderness badass. Like,
absolutely.
In my head, that's what I thought it was. And so I'm like, all right, I want to do this before I turn 30. This was one of my goals. And so I was like, all right, what we're going to do is we're going to finish the PCT, and we're going to like eat a bunch of food and sleep for like a month. And then we're going to get back out there, and we're going to go do the other one. And
I mean, there's some logic in that, because you're in hiking shape.
Yep.
Your mindset is already there. If you got the gear gathered and put together,
yeah,
you just got to get your body back in ready mode.
Kind of get the big deficit out of the way and somehow maintain the trail legs. And then it was just, it was a simple matter of just flying over there and keep on walking. And so my plan was I was going to land in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, which is around the halfway point. And I was going to hike south to the border. And the next year, I was going to start off in like the spring and then complete it.
I see.
Yeah. And so that was kind of the plan. I get out there, and so I start hiking up Steamboat Springs. I, get onto this Forest Service road, and that's the funny thing about the CDT is it's like a lot of roads. A lot of roads.
I did not know that.
Oh, yeah. It's a bunch of road walking. And so one of them was just going up this Forest Service road to get up to the trail. And my left knee was just killing me. And I could not understand why. Because I'd just gotten off trail, had no knee problems whatsoever on the PCT, and it got to a point where the next morning I couldn't bend my leg without like severe pain.
Did you ever figure out what it was?
Yeah, I did. Eventually, that was a journey in and of itself, of a lot of hubris and a lot of being humbled. But yeah, it was It was one of those things where I was like, I'm going to try and make it to the next view, the next this. And the pain just exponentially increased. So I was like, and you learn this from Knowles and a lot of wilderness travel is like, don't be stupid.
Yeah.
Like, turn around when you need to. Mm-hmm. So that's what I did. I turned around, found a moose hunter who was driving around, and he drove me back to Steamboat, and my leg was really messed up. And so I came home, and single-mindedness, I was like, all right, we're going to get our knee better. We're going to do a bunch of knee rehab, And so in my head, because I'm a personal trainer, I know anatomy, I had pinpointed it to the LCL, which is the lateral. So this guy right here that runs on the outside of the knee, I thought I had either slightly torn it or inflamed it or something. So I'm going to strengthen my knee. So I spent the next 6 months strengthening my knees and doing, I don't know if you're aware of this individual, the knees over toes guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I made my own program out of his principles, followed the program, and my knee pain went away in like a couple of weeks. And I was like, sweet. And I built up to some really, really heavy knee variations where your knee's like way tracked out over your foot. And I was like, this is going to do it. So this time, next spring, I was like, I'm going to through hike it since I've got the time now. I'm going to start in Glacier at the Canadian border, and I'm going to hike south. And that's how we're going to do this, and we're going to do our Triple Crown. And so at this point in my life, I had taken on a lot of other interests. Actually, like right after the AT, because of, once again, you talked to this whole adrenaline thing. Right after the AT, I think it was like 3 weeks after I finished, I rolled out of bed, opened my laptop, and booked a skydiving thing. I think I remember I was up. I was vertical for like 3 minutes. Boop, 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 booked it. And then I think the next week I went skydiving, fell in love with skydiving. It was just an amazing, beautiful experience. Mm-hmm. And I was always really, really drawn to scuba diving as well. And once again, like, I'm not an adrenaline junkie. I just love to see the world. And to me, those were two other ways to see it and two other ways to move my body in space. Which
I was going to say, I'm sure there's a sense of seeing it that is really cool, but all of these things your body is experiencing, like the sensory input that you're getting, whether it's jumping on an airplane or going below water or hiking to the top of a mountain. You're getting it from all angles, not just from your eyes.
Yeah.
And so it seems consistent to me that you would do these kind of, and not for the sake of the adrenaline, but for the sake of the sensory input.
I love interacting. I love interacting with the world, And so I had these interests, but money talks, right? Yeah. And so I was like, all right, man, we gotta do the CDT. We gotta finish this thing that we've been wanting to do since we were like 20, and it was at the point where we were starting to think, let's get it out of the way, not let's go do it. And so that mindset was starting to kind of creep in, and I couldn't figure out why. So fast forward to Glacier, I land in Glacier, I'm all excited, and so I start off hiking. My knees are feeling pretty good, but still, like 5 miles in, I had like a 0.5 to 1 on the pain scale on my knee. Bit. And I was like, what is going on? Next day, kind of went away. And then the third day, I went through some snow, and you're kind of post-holing and sliding around, and my knee was doing all kinds of funky stuff. Pain came right back.
Oh, my gosh.
It's like, what the hell is this? And I was thinking, like, it's over. Like, my backpacking career is done. My fiance talked me out of that, obviously. She was like, no, there's something systemically wrong here. And so I think it was the third or fourth day, I was going down this hill, and the exact same thing happened. And I was like, okay, it's done. Mm-hmm. I need to go home and figure out what this is. And I told my fiance, because we were supposed to get married and all those other things, I had a whole bunch of life to live. And it kind of felt like the CDT kept pausing it. It's like, I need to get this done first before I do all these other things. And she told me, if you come back, I think you need to be at peace with not doing this thing. And I said, okay, I understand. So I came home, and I said, we're going to go to a doctor. I don't really go to doctors. I don't even remember the last time I went to a doctor for a checkup. Maybe I was like 19 for, just to get approved for Knowles. And so I go to this doctor, brilliant guy, older gentleman, really kind of athletic, no BS kind of guy. And I told him everything that I had done and everything that had been happening and the symptoms. And he just went, oh, you have IT band syndrome. And I was like, well, what is that? And he's like, oh, there's the IT band. And what happens is when it gets too tight, it pulls on this bundle of nerves on the outside of the knee because your hips and your glutes are too tight from stress. Which is why
Makes total sense.
Which is why as soon as you stop, it goes away. But as soon as you start, it comes back. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
How long is this going to take? He's like, well, a couple of weeks. And then you're good. I was like, what do I have to do? He's like, well, you have to strengthen the glute medius, which is the outside butt muscle, and you have to stretch your hamstrings. So the strengthening of one thing and the loosening of the other will relieve the tension off of the outside of your leg, and then you're good. And then you just hike normally. Slap myself in the face, really, when I thought, I was like, you idiot. Why didn't you go to the doctor first? Like, I had so much self-trust that I knew what I was doing that I wasted so much time.
Did it literally take a couple weeks and you were...
A couple weeks and I was fine. Yeah, I did a bunch of little side leg raises and stretched my hamstrings and poof, went away. So it was back on. And that was a very difficult conversation to have with my fiance of like, look, it's been 2 weeks. Can I try again?
Yeah.
Can I try again? She's so good to me. She's like, yes, but hike fast. And I took that literally because especially towards the end of the PCT, I was putting down like 30s and 40s.
Yeah, those are big days.
Yeah, at my very last day, I hiked the most miles I've ever hiked, ever. And I was 57 and a half in a day. Yeah, I think it was like, and it wasn't like a sidewalk. I think it was like 30 and a half thousand feet of elevation change. Just, and I'd hiked for, I'll tell you that story. It's a funny one. But anyway, yeah, CDT, same plan, except we're not going to do Steamboat Springs. We're going to start in the Great Divide Basin of Wyoming. Still kind of the halfway point, but it's flat. So I'll be able to really test my knee out before moving south into the mountains of Colorado. Seems like a good plan. So I get out there, and I'm hiking along, and I think it was like 19 miles the first day. Look at it split. It was really easy. And I was like, okay, that was all right. And so I do 24 miles the next day, and it's like, how do I put this? It's like when you start getting desensitized to something, and there's no real growth there. There's no real like challenge or change. And so I think I did like 36 the next day, and I was really kind of trying to push myself because I was trying to find the edge of the growth that I had found on the AT and the PCT, and I wasn't finding it, and it was really frustrating.
Are you talking about like the physical challenge?
I would say the mental emotional challenge more than anything.
Okay.
And then that's
interesting.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
you can force the repeat of the physical challenge. That's what you were doing. You were stretching your miles and making it more difficult. But the mental, emotional piece just has to happen.
It has to, yeah.
Did it end up?
Nothing happened.
It never came.
That was the scary thing because I was like, and it was one of those things where it's like, am I being arrogant in saying that I believe I have mastered on-trail backpacking? And it was like, oh shit, I think so. And so I started just incorporating random challenges. So I did the Great Divide Basin of Wyoming with 1 liter of water capacity, which you're not supposed to do at all. You're supposed to have 4 to 5.
Yeah.
And it was just like one of those things where it's like I was trying to find the growth. I was trying to find the stimulation. I was trying to find what else is there to learn. And so when I'd done the AT, I learned a lot about deprivation and hardship and just endurance. And then the PCT was a lot more technical. It was a lot more land navigation, a lot more self-trust, a lot more self-advocacy. And so with those two big skill sets, I had gotten onto the CDT, and it was too easy. Everything was too smooth, and I was starting to ask questions. And I was like, do I really want to do something that I've already done for months and months, that I already know how to do?
Mm-hmm.
And
for what purpose?
For what purpose?
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, well, you want to see stuff. You want to interact with the world, right? And it's like, I have been doing this for years at this point, because I had done, the backpacking in Iceland. I had done the backpacking and exploration of like Africa and the Dominican and all of these like explorative places that I've done via walking. Mm-hmm. If you could boil it down to its basic, like most basic form, it's exploration of the world by putting one foot in front of the other. Mm. And it was getting to a point where it was like, it was doing more harm than good. And so the amount of time and the time investment was starting to just not be worth it.
I gotcha.
And it was one of those things where it had also started to feel like an escape.
Oh, yeah.
So it was like why are
legitimate reason to not engage in other parts of your life.
Yeah. So I started feeling that again, because of my experience with the AT, and it was like, are you avoiding other challenges? Are you avoiding other ways to see and interact with the world that you're really excited about? Because the other thing too is like the Great Divide Basin, there is nothing out there. Like, if you ever want to reach a point in auditory silence where you can hear your organs move, go there.
Oh, wow.
Like, you could stand there and just hear absolutely nothing. And so it was a great place to think.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where I had built it up so much in my mind that this was going to be the Titanic hike. It was supposed to be the hardest, the highest, the toughest, the roughest.
There wasn't any of that.
And it was a road walk. And in my head, I was like, okay, well, there's other parts of the CDT that are extremely difficult. Cool, which ones? Glacier. Well, you did that. And how did it go? Well, besides my knee hurting, nothing. It was fine. I ran into a moose, like nothing really crazy. Mm-hmm. That scared the shit out of me. That was like, oh no, I'm shrugging everything off now. Because it was like, oh, well, what about the mountains of Colorado? Well, it'll be fine.
Was it a lack of being present in the moment and appreciating that, or?
Yeah, I felt like I felt like
you can do that even when you've mastered something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe it takes a little more effort.
It takes a little bit more effort, but it was one of those things where I wasn't there.
Yeah.
I was thinking about everything else that I wanted to do once I'd gotten this out of the way. And in my head, I was like, oh, you care more about the prestige of doing this than you do actually doing this. You don't give a shit about hiking this right now. And it was like,
so did you pull the plug?
So I called my fiance, and I was in the middle of the basin, and I was like, hey, babe, how's it going? And she's like, you okay? I was like, I'm fucking bored. I have hiked 22 miles with no water to dehydrate myself, to try and challenge myself, and nothing's working.
She probably didn't expect you to say that.
No. And so we had a very long talk out in the middle of nowhere. And I was just like, I just don't feel it. I've got the routine of backpacking down so much. Get up, eat your gorp, start walking, get water, gather here, take a break here, do these miles. And it was such a routine that was ironclad that I could have taken it anywhere and done anything.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, why?
Yeah.
Why?
It seems like that question has to be answered with any pursuit. What's the purpose? Like I mentioned earlier, sometimes it's first principles. These things are the most important thing to me, and this is why I do the thing.
Yeah.
Other times it's, maybe it is an accomplishment, but that's the why. But I can imagine that felt really probably scary and hollow to be to that point of going, yeah, I don't know why I'm out here. And,
yeah.
There's a lot of amazing things around you, and you weren't. It doesn't sound like you were really processing any of that.
that was terrifying to me because there was like antelope out there
Yeah.
running around, and the sunsets were gorgeous, and the silence was amazing. But it was also like, yeah, I don't really care. And when you are in that state where, and this was the really hard thing for me to, it's still hard for me to push past this sometimes, is everyone you know and love thinks this is the coolest thing ever, but you. And it's one of those things where you have a high-level athlete or performer or whatever, and everybody thinks that you're the best thing since sliced bread, and you're doing this amazing thing. But you on the inside, you're just like, I hate this now. I don't want to do this. And so my friends and my family are like, yeah, CDT, the highest, the hardest. It's the ultimate test. And I'm out there just like, nah.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's fine. And so in my head, it was like, okay, let's not judge ourselves here. What is the things that you want to do that are huge struggles and pursuits, but would also be like epic journeys? Because that's the one thing I do crave is like the long form progressions that take years to effectively milk. And it was like, well, I want to go to school. And I was like, you do? Like, yeah, I do. School takes forever to do, and it's really hard. And you have the added benefit that you suck at it. And it was like, yeah, that's, and that was the other thing too, was like the interaction with the world piece of like, I can physically do this thing very easily and suffer really no ill consequences. Give me 3 weeks and I'll be right back to normal.
Yeah.
That's not a lot. I've never really tested my brain, not in an intellectual capacity. I was a terrible student in high school. I didn't really care about college. My parents cared more about college than I did, so I went for them. Did terrible at it. And now that, I was, 29 at the time, and I was like, that would be an insane journey of school. Like, what if you got a doctorate? Like, what if you did? And then the other, outdoor pursuits of like, okay, you still love backpacking. What's harder than that? And it was like, well, you've been on a trail the whole time. What if you got off of one? And it was like what? And I was like, well, there's the Wind River High Route. That's not even a trail. It's a bunch of maps strung together, and there's an established route, but you got to learn.
You've got to orienteer through it.
You got to orienteer through it. It's above tree line. It's gorgeous and majestic, and it's also shorter and more intense. And I'm also reaching a period in my life where, like, I don't want to be gone for months and months at a time. A week or 2 or 3 sounds pretty cool, especially if I can do a more intense experience, a more learning experience, and still get the benefits.
Yeah. When are you doing that?
Hopefully this summer.
Okay.
Somewhere in there. Yeah, the Wind River High Route is definitely like one of my top things. I have this one big dream that I don't really tell people about. It's one of those things I'm kind of trying to keep close. I might mention it, I'm not really sure. It's one of those things where it's like, that's really stupid, but maybe. But right now, I got home and I told Annie, I was like, okay, we're done. I don't really want to do this. The Triple Crown was not what I thought it was. I thought it was this ultimate test. Turns out it wasn't, and it turns out, and that was the other thing too, is I was really trying to avoid that post-AT, your life is over ness. And so it was like, all right, well, what are the things that you're really looking forward to? What do you really want to learn? And it was like, well, I want to get really serious into my training. I want to get back into that. I want to hike the Wind River Range. I want to go back to school, and I want to learn scuba diving. And so I was choosing between scuba and skydiving as like the next thing to learn. And so last year I got certified in open water diving, and I have been slowly acquiring gear and just wanting to really get into that because it's just a new pursuit, and it's a new way to interact with the world.
Yeah, I mean, what I hear from what you're saying is it is a constant pursuit to expand yourself. You could call it learning.
Yeah.
In maybe non-traditional ways. And now you're back in the traditional route of school, classes, books.
Yeah.
But what you've done your entire life is find ways to stretch your limits and to see what you find on the other side. I think you've probably found yourself to be an extremely resilient, hard-charging, hard-headed at times, but resilient to get through difficult tasks. I wonder how would you distill it down? What have you found out about yourself the most by doing these things for the last 15 or 20 years?
Peace.
Ooh,
Peace.
tell me more about that.
So there's one thing that I've always, it's a feeling. It's this thing that happens to you when you get into these zones of maximum shittiness. And I don't mean like physical pain.
Mm-hmm.
Like I could go do a set of push-ups right now and just almost knock myself out.
Yeah.
Anybody could do that. I could run around the block and physically torture myself. Anybody can do that. It's very low-hanging fruit. But the mental and emotional stretching, you don't have the luxury to think about small things when you're there. When you are struggling up a mountainside, or when you're, actually, here's a really good example. When I was in the Sierras and my two buddies that I was hiking with got ahead of me, and I had a really shitty cell phone, and my gut hook app was not working. We were going through snow. There's no trail. You are post-holing through snow. So I was following their tracks, and another set of tracks went off in another direction. I took the wrong one, and the tracks disappeared. And I am out in the middle of absolute nowhere. And it was one of those things where I'm kind of in a valley, and you're looking around, and all you see is ridgelines, and all you see is mountains forever. And it was one of those distinct feelings of like, I'm screwed. Like, there's nothing out here. There's nobody out here. Like, I need to figure this out now. And it was one of those moments of like, calm yourself, pull out your gut hook app, look at the map that's on there, look at terrain features. Oh, there's a lake. Go to the lake. And you're going to go down the lake, and sure, it's a 2,000-foot descent, but it's the only thing that you know is here. So you go down to the lake, you swing around the little horseshoe thing, and then you just go straight up the mountain, and you will run into the trail. That is the logical thing. Is it going to take you 4 hours to do it? Yes. And it was one of those things, and it's that inner peace of like, it's going to suck, but
It's okay.
It's okay. I'm here. I have a plan. I have a thing that I'm going to do, and there's going to be a reward on the other side of it. One, I learned something about myself, this self-reliance that you can do it. You don't need anybody else to do it for you. And when you get there, too, you're also back on trail, so you're good. And it's one of those things where when you do something really hard like that, and the amount of peace that comes afterwards and during, it's irreplaceable.
Yeah, that's probably a good way for us to bring the train into the station, because if any of us are pursuing these adventures for some sort of external validation from someone else, or from even being able to say we checked it off the list, that's hollow. Like it's shallow.
It really goes away quick.
And it goes away quick. That's a great point. But what you're describing is this internal validation. You're doing this for you, and the thing that you gain from this can't be seen, it can't be touched, but it certainly has changed your life, I would say.
Yeah, these trails are not Christmas puppies. They are not a beautiful little thing that you get to hold and show off to everybody, and then the dog grows up and you get rid of it. That's not how that works.
Yeah.
The only thing that I want to do is to expand myself, and therefore expand my possibilities of being able to do other stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I will say the kind of weird, dastardly dream that I have going, combination of extreme environment, no trail, and solitude, extreme solitude. I don't know if you're aware of who Colin O'Brady is.
Oh, yeah, I loved his book.
Yeah, I want to do that.
Are you serious?
I want to walk across Antarctica. I really do.
Pull your own sled?
Yeah, and I've always been, my parents will roll their eyes at this one. Winter was my least favorite season when I was a kid.
Well, you're not going to like Antarctica.
because of the amount of time that I spent arguing with my mom about the amount of clothes that I do not need.
I got you.
Yeah, I hated it. And I would always rip the coats off and stuff around my T-shirts anyway. I have a ridiculous hot-natured talent. It has to be like 5 degrees in order for me to wear pants. And yeah, I went through the entirety of the Sierras with shorts. Like, no, it was fine.
Yeah.
And so, and Antarctica has always just been really, really intriguing to me. It's this otherworldly place, bottom of the planet.
Yep.
Like, just the furthest from the furthest.
I mean, the way he described that landscape and
Impossible
it's-
First, I believe it was called.
Yeah, Impossible First. Great book. I've recommended it to many people.
Yeah, I love that book.
But the fierceness of the landscape and the solitude that it brought him. I mean, the guy says over and over again in the book, he had no idea what he was getting himself into.
Yeah.
But the journey that he describes is very much what you've talked about through your outdoor adventures.
Yeah.
And what he learned about himself.
Yeah.
So
I have a faith that you will get affirmations when you're on the right track too. So like when I did the PCT, the first day that I did it, I sucked at it. I'd never been in a desert ever. I'm from North Carolina, and it was dry and it was hot, and my throat was all messed up, and I couldn't breathe right, and I was not planning water very well. And I sat down and I was just roasting in the sun, and as I was doing this, a swarm of bees came by. And I talked to my friend about this because he keeps bees, and he was like, dude, that's really rare to see. And they were transporting their queen from one hive to another. And it was this dense black cloud of bees. And they just like, just like went by me. This amazing natural thing that you rarely get to see. And I just like sat there and watched it. And it was one of those things where it's like, you're on the right track. This sucks.
yeah, it's like,
And you're supposed to be here.
yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
But,
Well, Rob, I really appreciate you. I mean, we're usually these conversations are an hour. We're pushing 2. And
I didn't even notice.
I think,
Yeah.
I mean, it was a great conversation. I could do this all day long. I feel
sure.
like there's so many pieces of your trail time that I wanted to go pursue, and we didn't even get to that. But if anybody crosses you on the trail, what trail name do you go by?
Roadside.
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 I'm sure there's a story to that, but
Yeah, there is.
for another time, I'll have you back, and we'll pick that back up. But I really appreciate your time. and
Absolutely,
this has
my
been,
pleasure. Yeah.
an absolute blast.
Yeah, this
from
has
one
been
introvert
great.
to the other.
Yeah, first podcast ever. I don't feel like
You
I
nailed
fucked this
it.
one up too bad.
No, you nailed it. Good job. Okay, man, I really enjoyed that. I hope you did as well. The next one will be coming at you in a couple weeks, so stay tuned. Until then, I hope you have your own great adventure.